Hello, everyone who's online, and those of you that aren't, where are you? But those of you that are online, you get joy for the next hour of me talking at you on a screen. Isn't that lovely? Welcome, everyone, to those of you that have no idea what you're watching right now. It's me, my little head, bouncing around with a load of pictures being edited in that program there, Capture One. So, Capture One being a raw processing piece of software, so a raw editor that takes the files that your camera records that's come from a lens, or it's come from a sensor that's received light through a lens of a scene that you took a picture of, hopefully. And that picture, sometimes when we have the raw file, while it creates a huge amount of extra information, which is really useful for getting the best out of your image of your scene, sometimes it doesn't look quite as vibrant or as interesting or exactly what you meant when you were trying to capture it. So we use software like Capture One to hopefully try and bring it back to, as we say, what you saw. And if we can get it to a place where you're happy, then that's the whole purpose of this session. So you guys over the last week have been sending in pictures. We'll talk about that in a second. We're going to edit your images, not mine. Most of them have been sent in with either a problem or a to-do list. In one case, it was quite a long list. But we'll try and get through as many as we can. These are probably issues that you all see with your raw files. So we'll try and get as many of the problems sorted out so that you can all do better. It's cool, eh? Including me. We're going to talk about that in a second because I forgot. Well, I don't know whether I forgot something or I didn't know something or I did know it and then I forgot it and now I don't know it again. But we'll talk about that in terms of the workspace in Capture One in a second. But before we do, so Capture One itself. Current release, which is the release that we're using today, is 16.6.5. That hasn't changed since last time. Standard spiel from me, which is if you are on a perpetual license, an existing user of Capture One that bought what's called a perpetual license, that is the version you're entitled to, which is 16.6. The 0.5 bit is what we call a point release. It's minor releases, and it means that anything 16.6, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, all the way up to 0.99999, you're entitled to use as a perpetual license holder. The second that flips to 16.7, you are not. You'll find an upgrade option within your account on CaptureOne.com. For those of you that haven't seen Capture One and have no idea what we're talking about, go to CaptureOne.com. You can download a free trial. Works for 30 days. There's no limitations to it. There's no silliness. And for those of you that are subscribers, slightly different approach. So you are paying either every month or every year for the right to use the very latest version of Capture One at any point in time, or any previous version, your choice. So if you're not on that version there as a subscriber, you are currently paying for something that you're not getting, and that's silly. So please make sure that you are up to date on your version of Capture One. Before we get going into Capture One itself, Facebook group where we do our monthly competition. So for those of you that are vehemently opposed to Facebook and everything that Meta spew out, I'm afraid you've missed this bit because it's the only place that we can actually run it. But for the last month, you lot have been sending in your entries into this month's competition where you win absolutely nothing other than visual bragging rights on this channel. So without further ado, let's go to the runners-up. So this month's, or last month's, August theme was broken. Here's our runners-up. You get absolutely nothing. You didn't even get applause. You don't even get like admiration. You just get a runners-up badge. I'm really sorry about that, but still quite like them. They're cool images. I love let's get Mr. Grover up. Grover pointers on. I love a good disused gasoline pump. And there's something about the fact this can't be called a petrol pump because it looks like a gasoline pump. It looks American. We love these. So that one, nice. That one, Ian. Good. This one. So second Ian Beecham, in the note for this was, here is a broken shopping trolley and another broken shopping trolley lurking in the background. I quite like the narrative. I had spotted it, to be fair. And there are places, mostly around the UK, where this is quite a reminiscent scene of, when we were growing up and now. And then final runner-up, being Greg, this one. It's obviously a broken old boat. It's quite literal. So these three are quite literal. I quite like them though as scenes. One thing I will say, in some of the entries this month, while they were literally something that was broken, what I'm also looking for is something that looks compositionally quite nice and pleasing. Don't get me wrong, I'm not planning on hanging a picture of two broken trolleys, shopping carts, whatever you want to call them, on my wall. But it is composed actually quite well, and actually the depth of field is about right. The focus drop off is good. It's a well composed image, Ian. Just maybe find a better subject in future. So our winner, as a result of me just giving you that spiel about maybe the literal side's okay, but not necessarily the composition or the photographic part. Lotfi, well done. Broken. See? It's actually broken lines. I like this. A bit like Morse code. It's a load of broken dashes, broken dots, broken whatever, broken shadows, broken reflections, broken light, whatever you want to call it. That's why we have a theme. So well done. Lotfi gets the Growfee. There we go. That sounds kind of weird when you say it that way. But there we go. Absolutely no financial value whatsoever, and you will not receive anything in the post. However, well done, Lotfi. You get bragging rights. Nice shot. It's composed really nicely. It's sharp front to back. It's actually a really nice piece of artwork there. Well done. There we go. Speaking of things that you don't get physically. So, two things. Number one. Let's get Mr. Grover out. For those of you that are thinking about booking onto Teamwork's workshop in March with me and the Teamwork guys around the Jurassic Coast, get going with that because they're starting to sell through. So bear that in mind. I know I spoke to one person last week that was thinking about it, and they've now pressed the button because they learned that there's not infinite spaces on there. In fact, there's very few spaces on there. So if you're interested in going on what we normally don't do, which is a very small, granted, but group workshop, go there. That's the one. Down there. Link in the description. See, I can sound hip. Link in description. Like and subscribe. But go there. You will learn what that trip entails, what's involved, what's included. It's actually all included is the key part. But yeah, it's quite a nice way of spending a weekend out of the coast shooting some really cool stuff. And then finally, before we get into editing, I got beaten by someone. I don't know how this happened. So, for those of you that have already ordered this one, we are sending out a special edition magazine with a little free gift inside, which is quite fun, to different people who order it. Those of you that have, some of them have started arriving. Bear in mind they're being sent out in batches. Some of them have not even been sent out yet, so please bear with. It does say that it might take 4 weeks to get to you and so on. They're being printed in sort of batches. However, I reserved, so we've got an edition of 50. We only actually put 45 up on sale. Last week we talked about that we were down. I think we'd sold 41 or something like that. We were down to the last 5 anyway. And then yesterday I put on sale. We actually released the last 5. Wasn't planning to. We were going to keep them back, but figured, well, why not? And then there are now only 3 of those available. So someone was actually watching and pressed the button. If you want a copy of that, it will not be reproduced. It will not be extended. It will not go beyond the 50. You'll find the link down below. Those of you that have already received it, well done. Thank you. It's kind of cool because we're keeping the whole print thing going. Some of them we've seen have been kept in customs, but they've now been released. So that's all lovely. So you're all receiving them. But they'll be over time. So there are, I think at the moment, still 3. We'll see, but up to you. There we go. Right. To get your images onto this session, you go there. Now, I know that WeTransfer has some weirdness going on at the moment in general, whether or not it's a moral issue, a terms issue, a weird change to how they do things issue. We're still trying to find a suitable one that actually gives us a drop link that's not changeable, but in the meantime, that's where to go. If you put in your name, so we can include you, can't include you without your name, put in a description of the problem and your raw file with any edits if you have done them, and we'll try and get them on this session. Right. Oh, that was quite the whirlwind intro. Normally it takes a little bit longer than that, but we've done a lot. It's covered a lot of ground, guys. For those of you that are live online, please comment, heckle, question, anger, whatever you want. But yeah, All good. And welcome back, Earl. Earl's been away for a long, long time, but he's back online. So I'm expecting words. For those of you that are watching in the future, I'm not going to reply to you. I can't because I said this before you even watched it. But if you put stuff in the comments, we'll try and answer any technical questions or whatever you've got before. Not philosophical ones. Right. Capture one. And we go straight into a very dark screen. This is actually a picture from Ash. And Ash, we had some stuff backwards and forwards last week with the moon shot. And Ash's first words is, I think, from memory, it was something like, I know that this is woefully underexposed, completely. However, yes, it happens. I've done it before. I've got home and gone, oh no. And do you know what? I tell you what, one of the biggest issues you're going to come against with this, please, people, and handy tip, when you're shooting at sunset or after sunset or before sunrise, please turn the brightness of your screens down on your camera. It lulls you into a false sense of security otherwise. When the ambient light starts dropping, remember that the brightness of your camera, if it's at 100% display brightness, it is literally blasting photons into your eyes that are much brighter than reality. Now, of course, the display is a variable brightness. I get that, and it does mean that sometimes, your histogram, which you should be relying on your camera at the time as well, this is more important than what you're seeing on the display. But it is easily possible with a bright display that this would have looked like this to Ash. And obviously when you get back home, it doesn't. It sits down the bottom. So just bear in mind. And so sunset, sunrise, of course, at night. Oh my gosh, the number of people I know that have shot in their heads amazing aurora images. So aurora australis or aurora borealis, whichever one you want to go for. You look at the back of the camera, it's like, oh my God, it's so vivid, it's so bright, it's wonderful, it's exactly what I wanted. Get back home and it's almost like there was none. And the reason is because you've got that bright display. So in the dark, pull your display down. Oh, Ash, look at the confessions. That is what happened. Good. And the histogram was off as well. So, number one, turn your displays down to match the ambient light. It will give you more of a chance to get it right. And also, by the way, it will help with your night vision if you're not getting blasted with bright screen while you're looking at the subject. But number two, as a backup, please consider using your, let me get my mouse back, using your histogram on your camera as a double check. Now, luckily in this histogram, believe it or not, create floating tool, histogram, believe it or not, we just escaped it falling off the left wall, as we call it, this being the left wall, shadow wall, this being the highlight wall on the right. So even if I turn my exposure warning on, none of this is actually underexposed. It's not in the nice parts, so that ideally we want things to be to the right as much as safely possible. Very key, safely possible without overexposing. But we don't have anything down in the dumps in terms of the shadow. So this is a 2:15 exposure down here. ISO 100 should be relatively clean. We will get some noise from sensor heat here, and we'll talk about that in a second. But yes, this image is underexposed. It's underexposed by, and let's turn our exposure warning on. So in other words, how high could we have pushed it without overexposing or exposing? 3 1/3 stops. So this could have been, what is that? 8 times, 10 times, 11 times brighter in real terms, or it's 11 times too dark, without pushing it to the point where it overexposed. But equally, it would have taken it, there we go, another 3 stops under to be actually off the 0 end of the scale. So in other words, when my shadows become warnings in blue because they've gone below 0. So even though, Ash, this is woefully underexposed, yes, bad, don't do that. It's not actually unrescuable. So just bear that in mind. So This is the JPEG that Ash sent through saying, you know, I've got to this. I would say this here starts to feel overexposed, oversaturated, so it's rescued. You're worried about noise. There isn't actually too much of a noise issue in here, apart from one thing which is a special thing that we'll talk about in a second, which is these, which is single stuck pixels. Hot pixels, single pixels, stuck pixels, annoying things, whatever you want to call them. But they are rife in here, and one of the reasons is because your sensor got hot, and they're most prevalent when you can see deep shadows in there. So that's where that's coming from on the JPEG. There's a quick fix for that in Capture One that people forget. We'll cover that in a second. The thing that I mentioned that I'd forgotten about or didn't know or did know and have since forgotten about, not sure which one it is, for an undisclosed reason, I've been playing a lot with layers and masks recently, and specifically masks that start to duplicate across many layers. That may become clear in the future at some point. But the problem with that, with many, many layers, is that when you put your layers tool, which I would always have you do, up above the pinned line here, it's very small. So if I create a few layers, this gets really annoying to scroll down. If I move my layers tool to below the line, this thick line here being the pinned area at the top versus the unpinned area at the bottom. So this bit scrolls, this bit always stays visible. Please always have your histogram and your layers in the top and the pinned area, because it means that you're keeping an eye on what you're doing at all times. But if I move my layers down to here, below the line, all of a sudden it gets bigger. And I was like, that's annoying. I wish it could be bigger at the top. Well, of course. I spoke to Mr. Grover, and he reminded me, / told me, well, you just change it here, right? You just saw me do it. So you can have it auto size. That can be a little bit annoying. But your layers, if you're finding you're constantly scrolling too much, the default is small. If you've got a big enough screen, and bear in mind what you're seeing here on this broadcast is about probably a third of my screen. So my normal screen is much bigger in terms of workspace. I can easily manage this. I can easily manage even the large version. So these 3 dots here, the layers one has a specific thing. So if I go to another one, you have the standard things, you know, preferences, move it to the scrollable area, whatever. But layers and masks has some extra options in here. I mean, you've obviously got save adjustments as a style, but these 4 here, as I say, straight over my head. And it turns out that this would have been quite useful for me for a long time to have switched to, bearing in mind the number of layers we use. So please set your workspace up to the way that works for you. But bear in mind, if you are having your layers in the pinned area, you can now make it bigger should you need to, just in case you had an abundance of layers and masks that all had to work together. Right, moving on. So, our image layer. Let's clean this up. Number 1, we know that we can push the exposure quite a way up, right? So I know, and I'm going to leave my exposure warning on. Please do that. It's with your exposure warning, just bear in mind in your preferences under exposure, those of you that have been here for a while will know this. I would always advocate, please have yours set to 255 and 0. There is no point in telling me when a highlight is maybe going to blow soon. There's no point in telling me that something might not have enough data to be not quite a shadow. I want to know when it's no data and no data. I want the minimum and the maximum to be my warnings. In other words, when I see a warning, it's a real warning. There is no more data available in that cell or pixel. So for that reason, it means that when I push this up, I can literally go as high as I want. This is now telling me this is actually overblown. It's not telling me it might do. It is overexposed. So I'm going to pull this back, maybe to there. Good. Look at my histogram. All that data's just been uncrunched. Beautiful. I could do it without exposure. A very similar approach, of course, would be to do with levels. It's not going to, you notice it's not going to have quite the same effect. So exposure does do a little bit of ramping and a bit of amplification as it moves along. Not a huge amount. It's still sliding every value effectively. But levels is doing some stretching, which is different. So exposure grabs all those values and it pushes it further up or down the histogram. Levels will leave our shadows where they are. So exposure, remember, is going to have lifted the shadows as well. Levels leaves this where it is if I do this. And it allows me to pull up my, oh, there we go, highlights to there. So I've just pushed that to as far as I can go without overexposing. There we go, the warning's gone. Let's do the same, but with exposure, because I want you guys to understand the difference with these, but certainly visually. Look at this difference. So neither have an overexposed area. I've got rid of the warnings on both. That's through levels. Stretching. This is through exposure. Moving. Moving lifts everything. Stretching lifts the highlights more than it does the lowlights, effectively. To Earl's point, please don't push it too far. The dark melancholy, what word, is so nice. Yeah, I don't disagree. So that's why we can make a decision here in terms of how you want to play it. Because if I look at a brand new variant, so this is without any changes. Let's actually put that down the bottom so it's out of the way. So brand new variant here versus exposure to the left versus levels to the top left. So levels, stretched, exposure, shifted, original. You can make the decision in terms of how you want it to appear, but just bear in mind they behave differently and very obviously differently. Exposure, levels, exposure, levels. Within levels, you can still obviously tweak, so you can still use your exposure tool if you want. You could pick up a luma curve in the middle and maybe protect those highlights just by pulling that top highlight one back down again. Oops. Where are we going? What have we got? We got a bit of color going on, so let's pull that there. So I'm lifting some mid-tones, but keeping the dark sort of moodiness to it. All of that is your choice, but you don't have to stick with just exposure. Exposure is a very blunt tool, just like it is in your camera. Overexposed, underexposed. Levels and curves gives you the ability to tweak the mid-tones, to tweak how much things are stretching. Yeah, all good. So what we have got here, however, in this shot are these things. I'm going to zoom in overly so you can see it. A hot pixel. So let me turn the exposure warning off because that confuses things, because look at this one, it looks pink, right? Nope, that's my exposure warning. So a hot pixel is likely to manifest itself in either a green, a red, or a blue single pixel, like this one here. Sometimes you can get them as a white pixel. There's a red one there. There's a red one. Looking for a blue somewhere. There's another red one. Anyway, excuse me. We're going to use a very simple tool in Capture One, and it's been there from day one, and no one really uses it, or when they do use it, they forget about it in future. The second your exposure is more than a fraction of a second, there is a risk that your sensor gets hot. And when it gets hot, you can have a stuck pixel. In fact, you can have stuck pixels when the sensor is not hot. My Fuji, the little X106 thing, had to get sent back to Fuji for them to remap it. So I had a hot pixel. They don't replace the sensor, they just delete it out of the mapping for what it records. And you can do that yourself manually in Capture One. So we have up here our details tab. Under noise reduction, single pixel. Oh look, these ones have gone. Great, this one's not. So it's got rid of this one here, look. So without, with, but it's left these are stubborn. All you got to do is keep sliding until they go. That one's gone. Oh, look, that one's gone. Now, do not get crestfallen, there's a word. If you zoom out and you see your single pixel is back there, and you see, I hope on your screens, you can see that one's back there. The reason that it's done that is because this is the preview size. It only applies the single pixel noise reduction at 100% or more. So it is annoying because it doesn't update the preview, but all I'd have to do is go into here at 100% or more, and you'll find that the effect that I've had has gone. So I think I have tried this before, but if I regenerate the preview on this, it doesn't make a difference in terms of this single pixel noise reduction. It's only when it's using the actual raw file and applying the noise reduction, in other words, at 100% or more, that it will disappear. But when it does, look, we've got rid of them. In fact, there's not one single pixel there. And if I compare that to the JPEG that had noise reduction on it, they're all left here. So just bear in mind that there is a fix for it. It's built into Capture One. There is a challenge here, Ash, which is lifting it this far. I am starting to see some noise appear. Whereas if I leave it down here in the darkness, as Earl's very keen on, so just bear in mind, you don't want to necessarily push those. You can push it so far. We've proven, there's a lot of latitude in your dynamic range that's captured in that camera. What camera is it? Let's have a look. Nikon D800. Okay. Oldie but a goodie. We like those. To be fair, the 800 was a landmark camera at its time. It sort of beat everything on the market. And actually, it's got a very good sensor in it. So just bear in mind, this isn't the result of the camera picking up bad data. This is the result of just pushing it too far. And it doesn't need to be pushed this far. This far feels a little bit artificial. This far, if this is a little bit too dark for you, it's your choice. Use the brightness tool instead, just to subtly lift it. And I'd maybe get to there, but no further. So let's have a little look at some questions quickly. Bjorn, let's take the best of both worlds. Hopefully that on the screen is the best of both worlds. So there is the original attempt, the JPEG. There is our RAW. That's where I would land. I wouldn't push it this far. It becomes a bit flat. That's with just exposure. I would land there, personally. I think that's quite a nice compromise, as it were. It keeps the moodiness, keeps all the colors. If I start to push this too much more, so exposure tab, turn on my exposure warning, sorry. The second I go more than, we're already actually slightly overexposed here with that brightness. But I'm accepting, just bear in mind, I'm doing that consciously. What is overexposed here is not all of the colors, not all the channels, it's the red channel. So as I move over here, look, that red channel up here, our color readout, will go to 255 because the red is overexposed. We can see that little spike here in the histogram that tells us that. So the red is overexposed, but I know that, and I'm okay with that. The green and the blue, not. So we've still got some detail. Overall luminosity 187, lots of detail in there, that's fine. You could push it a bit more. I don't think you need to. What have we got in questions? Tony, what would using the brightness slider achieve with this underexposure? So I've just done it to a certain extent. Brightness is sort of a mix between levels and exposure, so it's a softer, easier tool to use than levels, but it's doing roughly the same thing. It's dragging data up. It's leaving the shadows where they are and it's pulling them up, or in the case of the other way, it's leaving the highlights where they are and it's pushing the midtones down. Think of brightness like a midtone shift, a little bit like the middle line in your levels tool. Sorry, you can't see that because Tony's comments there. This line in your levels tool. And you definitely now can't see it because my mouse disappeared. What's going on? Anyway, that one, for the third time, this line in your levels tool is what brightness is mainly affecting. Craig, many sensors are ISO invariant when they also always collect the same data in the camera amplifiers. Yes, so it's a voltage-based change. We don't have time in today to go through ISO invariants, but effectively, most camera sensors have 2 or 3 stopping points, which is where the camera sensor is native at that ISO, and everything else following it is basically a fake ISO. It's done through voltage change. So in other words, it is recording the same amount of data. It's just amplifying it, as Craig says. Typically, there was a big movement a few years ago about only ever shooting at your base ISO and then pulling it up. Going back to what I was saying earlier about turn your brightness up, underexposing intentionally by using base ISOs is great. It's all well and good as long as you know what you're doing. The second you get it wrong, it's going to hurt you when you get home and it's not right. One other thing I forgot to mention, in here we do have a couple of dust spots. Let's see if under our lens corrections, dust removal, click remove dust. There we go, gone. We have, so single pixel will get rid of most stuff. If it's not bright enough, like in this case here, you might need to just do a quick check around, maybe go to a healing brush, a manual healing brush. So what we mean by that is choose your source point with the Option key or the Alt key and click your destination. But do check, don't rely purely on the tools, not just on the single pixel noise reduction tools. Get rid of that mask. Do use your eyes as well. But yeah, ISO invariance is great if you're not risking underexposing too much, and then you're in trouble. Where are we? Simon, I'm not sure if I'm seeing hot pixels or dust on my screen. It's very rare to have luminous red, green, and blue dust, I'd say. But you'll see. So Ash, that answers your question, I think. You just need to play with it a little bit. Right. Michael, what happens if you push single pixel too far? Good question. So, two things that I've discovered with single pixel if you push it too far. Number one, it risks you losing little bits of detail. So maybe around the edges of a sign with some text, you might find there's a little red pixel or a blue pixel or something like that, and it can remove it. The second, the worst one, and I have seen this and we've demoed it, I think, a long time ago before. If you push single pixel noise reduction too far on a picture of the galaxy, you'll find some stars go missing. Now, in theory, it shouldn't do that because it's looking ideally for single red, single green, single blue, which stars aren't. But they can appear to have a color tint. And if you push the slider too far, it will also get rid of, as you saw, what can be a pure white pixel, i.e. a star. So it's rare that you get the stars up at the 255 level, which is what single pixel is looking for. But if you do, and you push that single pixel slider too much, so this one, by the way, it only works on the base layer, the image layer. You can't use you can't use single pixel on an adjustment layer. It only works on the actual image layer. Don't forget that. But single pixel can erase the stars. There we go. So that's what happens if you push it too far, Michael. Don't do that. Paul, does ISO also reach 11? ISO reaches what? 102,400, something like that? Oh, now he's back. Sorry, that sounded really, really obnoxious, isn't it? Oh, right. A black and white conversion. We've talked about this a couple times. So I get what you've done. I don't like it, but I get what you've done. And just to explain, the reason that I'm not a fan of it, it's nothing to do with black and white and colour. I love a good black and white architectural shot. But the conversion seems to have either introduced or amplified some of the challenges you had in the first image. So in this image, we've got a very, very big dynamic range challenge. You've got some very bright highlights here, some very dark trees here. If I turn my exposure warning on, let's create a new variant in color. There's nothing that's actually blown sort of too far. This isn't, again, a bit like Ash's images. It's not missing. So if I go into our exposure and just pull this up, sorry, I'm on the after. We have all the data in there for the tree. It's underexposed for sure. It's going to have some noise in it, but the data's there. Likewise up here, we have all the detail that's in this reflective material, metal presumably, but it's just very stark, right? And the sky looks okay. There's a little bit of a hint of a slightly lighter color or a cloud or something up there, but everything looks sort of okay. It's captured okay. This particular conversion has pushed some of that too far. So it's pushed the whites of the metal, the reflection, a bit too far. It's pushed these trees into oblivion, and this sky mottling that sort of happened here is nothing wrong necessarily. It is a conversion from the blue sky, but it's amplified that little tear in the sky, as it were. And you've also seen, hopefully, zoomed out, this looks a little bit more mottled, I guess is the right word. Bit orange skinny. There we go. Zoomed in, 100%, you don't notice it. So again, it's a preview issue. Please do. So I advocate one thing, which is always use before and after, constantly. But two, if you're looking at something and thinking that looks a bit wrong, Just maybe zoom into 100% and double check on yourself, because sometimes the previews are a little bit off. So what I would do personally with this, I would consider, first off, whether or not a linear response curve might help me, even with your existing adjustments. So if I go into my color tab, go to the ICC profile, remember this is a color image that you're converting. So change my curve from film standard or auto, which is what it is. Maybe go to linear response. Now, what's that done? Well, it hasn't lost any, bear in mind this is a curve. It hasn't lost any data. All of your data is still there in your histogram. And if I go to the curve, all it's done is it's just changed the profile that Capture One applies to that curve or to that image when it imports. So it's changed the auto ramping. Now, what I can see with linear response, and we can see a couple of issues here. Number one, look at this haloing around the trees. Now, that typically comes from our HDR sliders. And if I were to undo these, so it's still there, but it's less obvious, I would say. Some of that is going to come from the black and white slider, having probably done this blue. You see there? So halo, no halo. Halo, no halo. That needs to be a meme, doesn't it? Something at some point. So what's happening? Well, let's go back to our color. So this slider here tells the blue to darken. Anything that's blue in the image, please darken. And that's done in the sky, a world of good. Great. But the green, it's left here at 0. So at the transition point between the edges of the green and the blue, and this is one of the challenges you have with conversions rather than recording at the time, Capture One's got to digitally work out what to do with this edge. And that's a problem, right? Because digitally it's saying, well, this is kind of blue, kind of green. I guess we'll leave this bit of the sky in the green or the cyan area, so not darken it as much, and you end up with this weird place here. If I remove the cyan, which is probably that transitional point, it gets a lot better, right? So this cyan cannot be halfway between green and blue, because halfway between green and blue is that transition from the edges of the trees to not. I've got to decide, do we want this cyan to be, therefore, on the side of the sky, like that, more halos, or on the side of the trees, less halos. And I'm going to fall on that side. So immediately I've got that. If I go back to Earl's original shot, we don't have those halos. The reason we don't is because our linear response curve didn't exist on it. So let me just change this to go to linear response. You see how our colors shift slightly between standard and linear response. So because the colors have shifted, the implementation of that black and white conversion also shifts, and you end up with slightly different artifacts, slightly different problems. But what you also end up with, if I look here versus here, is a slightly more sympathetic way of dealing with those highlights. We now need to have a look at the shadows. So we'll do that next. One question, hold on a second. So Martin, exporting the image as JPEG, will the hot pixel also only be removed when the export is in full size similar to 100%? No. So whatever you export is baked in. So if you export it as a JPEG, as a TIFF, as a PNG, it doesn't matter. Whatever, the single pixel is never exported. It's always fixed in the export. So whatever you zoom in or out, it doesn't exist in that export. The export is clean at whatever view you want. So back to Earl. Let's have a look at our histogram and say, okay, so I'm happy with the black and white conversion-ish. What would have happened if I'd increased the green? Not a huge amount. So the trees actually are almost flagging as cyan, I think. No, they're not. Where are they? What are our trees flagging as? It's interesting, isn't it? Go to advanced, click on our tree. Oh, they're flagging as yellow. Interesting. Interesting way of finding out, right? So we've got a yellow and a red thing just in those trees, just to lift them. Again, I'm just going to zoom in and make sure that we don't have any issue here. We don't. Up here, I'm really not happy with that, so I'm going to create, just because it's going to really annoy me when I'm editing. If you've got something that's going to annoy, delete it or fix it. Don't just sit with it there and think, oh, I'll do that later. 9 times out of 10, we forget to do it later, and then it gets more annoying. So I just got rid of that tear in the sky quickly. Back to my image layer. Lifting the yellow and the red has done a good job. Make sure that it doesn't introduce any issues like haloing when you go back to it. Clarity on here, I'm going to pump that clarity a little bit more, actually. A little bit of structure. No dehaze on it, I don't think. And then we're going to go into our shadows along here. So our shadows in this case have been brought down. So the original edit has it brought down. The difference between shadows and black, if I look at the histogram here, shadows live in this bottom quarter. So this is a shadow, the sky is a shadow, the water is a shadow pretty much in here. This is a shadow, but these parts, the darkest parts of the image, sit down here in the left, they are black as far as Capture One is concerned. These being white. So look at my orange bar on my histogram. These are highlights along here. Highlight, 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 getting brighter until I get to there. That's white. So in my whites, if I were to pull this down, we get some of the clarity back. So if I look, for example, in here, even though this isn't blown out, my exposure warning is a little bit there. But if I pull this white down, watch these blades here. We get a little bit more detail in there. And all it's done is it's just softened that very, very brightest part to be a bit more soft. Reflection of the metal in there is quite funky as well. So same for shadows and black. So shadows, I'm just going to lift up a little bit. Okay. Black, i.e. the trees, but also the sky, interestingly, I'm going to lift up a bit as well. Now, I'm going to actually lift that up quite a way. I'm going to get to maybe almost as if we hadn't pulled it down. And the reason I'm going to do that is because if Earl wants the sky to be darker, independently of the trees, we can't do that globally. So let's create a new layer, a new sky layer. Many of you are going to know this trick. Remember, I'm choosing from a color image, right? So what could I do to get more of the mask around all these tree bits? Because the AI brush isn't going to do that. Well, I've still got Magic Brush. A Magic Brush, I can say sample entire photo. In other words, don't get constrained by anything blocking your way. Pretty low tolerance, I only want blue bits. And remember that even though this is a black and white output, the input was blue. Now, this has gone, interestingly, way too far, right? But I have a secret weapon, because this sky is between 35 and 57. These trees are not. So let's create a luma range and say I only want values that are between 35, roughly. And let's go to 60 maybe. I'm going to pull that ramp down there, pull the ramp down there. Now, no, that's annoying, isn't it? I was hoping I could get away with that. Let's go a bit more. Okay. So let's apply that. That's helped. Hasn't done the full job. So if I look at my mask now, that's way over, right? Too much. So let's go to my eraser. And I'm actually going to rasterize that layer because I don't want to use the luma range anymore. I don't want the luma range affecting me. So given that I have to do these as separate layers for now, let's go into here. I'm going to just go there. You notice I'm doing it quite rough because it doesn't really matter, because we're going to refine it. We're going to refine it again and hit apply. Okay. So we can then rub out our trees, but there is another way. Just thinking about all those steps. Let me clone this variant. Let's delete this adjustment layer, because remember, we're not dealing with a black and white image, right? We're not dealing with luminosity really either. We're actually dealing with a color image. So to help me visually, remember I'm going to turn this back on in a minute. Turn off your enable black and white. Create a new layer. Turn my mask off. And we're going to go to a color editor and we're going to choose this. And I'm going to say view selected color range to turn everything else black and white. Rather useful. And I'm going to say I actually want that and that and that. So anything that is pretty blue, specifically blue, not green, not purple, but blue. Okay. Remember, this is not a mask. There's no mask on this layer, but there can be, because now I've got my color range. Click on the three dots, create a masked layer from selection. So that takes all of our blue bits that we chose, and of course it's picked up some of the river, I get that. But that's a better mask for us, right? Certainly better than this mask. Doesn't stop me continuing to alter it, so I can go to my eraser, normal eraser, and get rid of all of that stuff because we don't want to affect it. Maybe get rid of that reflection in there. We don't want to get rid of this bit because I do want that mask coming through. And the reason that we've done all that, remember, so go back to my black and white, enable, is that with this mask, the color range mask, but we can now call it sky, I can, of course, just pull down my exposure a little bit. Now, bear in mind, those halos start to come back, right? Why? Because the mask is absolute. So it stops, basically, near the foliage. How do we fix that? Well, we can refine the mask. We can soften the edges of it. We can go to a point where there's no more halos, but it's not affected too much of the trees. Pretty nice. So that does mean then that the rest of my image layer, let's just go back to here. Why are we getting that? That's a bit odd because we don't have a split tone. What's going on there? Didn't mean to remove the tool. It's silly. What has just occurred there? Any ideas, people? Because I'm a little intrigued. But anyway, we see as black and white there, but when I go to my image layer, we do not. How weird. I'm not even going to touch that. It's not broken. Don't screw it up. I'm not happy over here on this sky part of that mask, if I'm honest. So I'm just going to add in a little bit, maybe, of extra masking. Maybe we just do a little bit of magic brush. David, you star. View selected color range boxes on. Which means when I go to my image layer, it's only viewing the yellow stuff. There we go. See, group effort, perfect. For those of you that didn't spot that, including me, when I was trying to make sure we were only viewing the blue, I ticked the little box, view selected color range. Well, of course, on my image layer, we had a range picked when I was trying to find out what the trees were of yellow, right? Well, unfortunately, with that still ticked, it meant that it was only showing the yellow of the underlying color image. Brain fry. But that's now gone. Well done, David. You don't get anything for that, but you do get some praise. Well done. So my sky layer up here, I just wanted to add a little bit up there and just maybe even a little bit more. Nope, that's going to start to grab the branches of the trees. In fact, it's done that as well there. Let me just go back a couple of steps there. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of that. This is one where Prasad's idea about having color ranges, right, could be quite useful. Let's not poke the bear. So let's just see what we can do. We can soften the edge of here very slightly with a low opacity. And that's all we need to do to get rid of, to a certain extent, some of that haloing. So you've seen what I've just done. Basically, we've just taken that mask and I'm just obscuring that transition point so that we don't notice the halos that are going on there. It does mean that that part of the tree is a bit darker, but you don't see it quite so much. With the sky, I'm going to take our clarity down a little bit. So you notice that little band goes. So look at that, without and with. So I've softened the transition. All good. But yeah, we get to a place where at least I can now see, some of the details. Let's just turn off that selected color range. Right. I can see the details. So 2 ways of doing it. One was with a luma range on the top. The other is using a color range. The color range is probably closer to what Earl wanted to achieve. I can still now go into my black and lift it a little bit, maybe only to there. That's plenty. And I could counter it if I wanted to with a bit more reduction in the sky if I really didn't want the sky to be that contrast. But I don't think there's a problem with a little bit of contrast between the trees and the sky. So I get to there. That was our starting point. That's where I sort of end up. And I just think there's more interest in this right-hand one than this one. This one's just being crunched a bit too far. It's too dark in the darks, too light in the lights. Too much going on. Will it show in the trees on the print? No, you wouldn't, because we've gone pretty much solid across there. Or if you were really worried about it, who was it mentioned? Lotfi. Yeah, so you can use the negative magic brush. So if I go back to my before and after, we can see that these trees are obviously green. So if I were to go into our magic eraser rather than magic brush, make sure my tolerance is right down and click into a tree. It's going to be tricky, isn't it? Yeah, we can get there. It's probably too much, so I'd maybe back it away and say I actually only want the opacity to be maybe 40. Yeah. So it's more subtle. We just want a subtle transition. We don't want to bring any attention to it. Okay, there we go. So next up, Rick. Another black and white conversion. What's going on this week? Edwin, we are going to get to you, maybe next week at this rate, but we are going to get to your Kingfisher because it's quite a nice shot. So Rick's shot here, one of those whirly whirlpools where the water swirls around. Lovely stuff. But a black and white conversion. And the question was, there was a few questions on there. We'll cover some of them. But the question was, which edit out of these two is better? I get what you're meaning here. So one of the things that I will flag, so Rick actually mentioned that he adds a layer, and I would encourage everyone to do this layer called Brighten for Print. Same principle as the camera display. So please do think about this. When you're looking at your display is bright, it's into your eyes, it's backlit, it's burning your retinas. Some images more than others, none this week, we're good. So when it's doing that, you're getting a false sense of how bright that image is. When you print on paper, paper does not glow. It can do, but typically print paper does not glow. Therefore, when you print, quite often it's disappointing because it's a lot darker than you were expecting. So a lot of people that I teach privately and whatever will, and certainly on workshops, we always have them add a print layer, a Brighten for Print layer. Now this layer here, interestingly, I'm just going to flag here, Rick, your Brighten for Print layer, negative shadows, negative whites, brightness up, yes, but your contrast is up. And the problem with contrast being up is that's not the same as brightening contrast. More contrast means the brights get brighter, the darks get darker. So this isn't a Brighten for Print layer in the strictest way that I would do it. To me, I've done over the years lots of test prints, and you get to know it by eye after a while. But if I have a Brighten for Print layer, typically it's got a brightness setting of maybe 10, around that, between sort of 8 and 10. And you might find a little bit of an exposure pop as well, just globally, for the printer. And that's the only reason that layer ever gets turned on. So for editing, we always turn that off. Your Brighten for Print layer, I worry about a little bit because this isn't all brightening. If you've got dark areas, this is darkening it more. And these two are also darkening in your HDR tools. But the principle of a Brighten for Print layer, stick with, please. It's a good idea. especially if you're printing with ICC. Another question you had was whether printing the raw out of Capture One with adjustments versus printing a TIFF or whatever else. It depends if you're happy with Capture One's printing. I know lots of people are, and printing the EIP or the raw with the adjustments is perfectly fine. Some people prefer to set up a TIFF file with the color profile embedded and have external print software manage it because they prefer the look of it. That's fine. There isn't really a right answer. In theory, if you print the raw with the adjustments and the right color profile in Capture One, or you print a TIFF of the exported version of that file that had the same color profile in it, as long as your print driver is consistent, in theory, they should both come out the same. In practice, different print software does things differently. What I would say is be consistent to yourself. So in other words, if you've printed 20 prints with whatever, image print or whatever, don't do the 21st out of Capture One, or the 22nd out of Photoshop, or the 23rd out of Microsoft Word, or whatever. Be consistent against what you normally print, because only then will you start to see with your eye, the differences that make it for your style of printing. So going back to the edit, one of the biggest questions you've got, so number one, black and white conversion, does it work? I think it does in here. This is the color version. I like the color version, but I think it's because I like color. I would be tempted in the color version to get rid of some of the muddiness by pushing this to be a little less green tint and a little less yellow tint, but then we get some weird stuff here, and I think that's because there's some further adjustments on here. But I would play with those colors more necessarily than, in fact, this weirdness here, it's sort of over popping, isn't it? And I think it's the recovery. So is it the adjustments? Yeah, so the highlight recovery, the white recovery, the brightness and saturation, popping all of that lot. It's not great on this water, I have to say. The water's not done well out of it. So I would suggest maybe not pushing that as much as you have in terms of the saturation recovery, because this may be a bit too bright, but this looks wrong. It's got color into it. You can hide that with a black and white conversion, and maybe that was the intention. But I'd always be in the camp of the black and white conversion is great. It's almost my last process after I'm happy with the color one. Personally, doesn't mean you have to do the same. If you're aiming for black and white, start with the conversion, no problem. But for me, I would say I kind of want to make sure that both versions are viable, rather than I've done all of this for black and white, go back to the color and go, oof, what have I done? Because to make a black and white conversion work, I could have turned this water pink, because my pinks in my black and white are lifted, for example, in this case. That doesn't make it a good edit, and I'd just be worried a little bit about that. Anyway, would I leave this rock in? The problem with this rock is not the rock, it's the bit that surrounds it, right? Because it is so bright. And it's almost like it's a bit of a star in that version. It's a bit of a distraction in here, and it does grab attention, not necessarily in a good way. Removing it completely, I think, is possibly a bit over the top. You don't need to. So if I were to take this one, the variant 2, what I'd be tempted to do with the rock, remember we don't want to darken the shadows, but what we can do is click our AI brush, click on the rock, create a new layer, click on the rock, click on its whatever, skirt, something, check our mask, so Option and M gives us a nice grayscale mask so we can get rid of all the distractions in the picture, purely see the mask, go to Refine. Let's go to there because I want to sort of spread it a little bit but not cause any issue. I'm also then going to go to my normal brush, 100% opacity, nice and small, and just repair this little crease that the AI brush doesn't quite get. So I now have a mask of my rock. I'm not going to pull the whole thing down, because if I do that it just looks odd. But what I can do is pull down those highlights and certainly down the white. Maybe the brightness, maybe drop the contrast a little bit, and then we can afford just a little bit of exposure reduction. Great. And that just takes us from there to there. All that's done is it's put the subject back up to the top. I'm not convinced about the levelness of this, and this is a bit distracting here. So again, personally, if it were my shot, I think I'd be drawing a straight line across there to twist that better. That also loses that rock. If we were to come in a little bit tighter as well over here, just to completely lose it, that to me works a little bit better. I might actually want to lift the overall brightness on our base adjustments even more, which sounds odd, but the reason I'm going to do that is because I'm going to pull in a vignette and I get to there. So personally, my edit would probably stop there in black and white. That was where we started. That, I think, is a more subtle way of leaving this rock in. I don't think removing it helps. I think it looks a bit odd. So I would leave it in, but not draw quite so much attention as having it almost fluorescent, and just fix that lean. This water, this is obviously going off into the distance. This water line here is the one that should be level visually. There we go. Cool. So there's Rick's waterfall. Very nice. There's a piece of architecture. Very dark, but like it's moody. It's just less moody now than when we started. And Ash's noise recovery, which actually didn't need too much noise recovery, it just needed a bit of lifting. And please, use your display brightness on your camera, use your histogram on your camera, use single pixel in Capture One. Great things. We should do them more. There we go. Next week, we will start with Edwin's picture of the Kingfisher. I promise, Edwin, don't worry, we haven't forgotten. But between now and then, you've got access, if you wish, in the description to those masterclasses to remind you of some of this stuff. If there are tools that you need a bit of a refresher on, there's a whole load of pro tips in this channel as well that are free to watch. They're sort of 10-15 minute things, if that, and they cover each individual tool in quite a lot of depth. For those of you, I think Paul has grabbed one, but if there's one left, then go for that. That's in the description as well. Well done, Lotfi. You did win that one. Pretty fair and square. I like the concept. Broken lines were good. The next competition will be in the Facebook group shortly. So do join that one if you choose. But between now and then, look after yourselves. See you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.